get started. Hey everybody, I'm Michael Shimidas. I'm the chair of the Hudson City Democratic Committee. Thanks for coming out. I wanted to start with some thank yous. So a big thank you for Rebecca Wolf in the back, who did most of the organizing to make this event possible. Also thanks to Sarah Sterling and Pookie Amsterdam and Beth Kanega, who are volunteering today to make this event possible. Thanks to the Columbia County Chamber of Commerce for hosting us. Thanks to our panelists who I'll introduce in a moment. And big thanks to you, the audience. I think a lot of you could probably be panelists up here with us. So we're going to try to save some time.
Any volunteers? Anybody want?
For your participation, and thanks just for your commitment for being interested in this issue. And also thanks to our local media partners. We have WGXC and Dan Udell, who are hosting on YouTube. So other people who aren't here can sort of see what's going on. Make sure that you sign up if you hadn't signed up when you came in. There you have sign-up sheets. So afterwards, we will share links so you can see the full report. And we'll also, any sort of like actionable things that come out of this meeting, we will share in a follow-up email. So that way you can stay connected with sort of what happened today and sort of in future follow-up activities. We also have index cards. If you have any questions that you weren't able to ask today, you can put them on the index cards and we'll try to get the answer to you and maybe include it in the email. So the goal of the panel is really to get a sense for what current projects are going on, or some of the current projects that are happening here in Hudson, as well as to identify some next actions that we all can take as a community, and then also just build general community support for these kinds of projects. So we're not going to be going into a lot of detail about why we need affordable housing. We're kind of taking that as a given, but I did want to sort of lay a foundation for why I think affordable housing is important. And I think the real key thing is that we want to serve the people who live here in the city. I think a lot of us are really committed to this community and committed to improving our city, but what that means is that we're improving the lives of people who live here. So what that, we've seen increasing rising rents, increasing home costs, so that means it's going to be increasingly hard for people to be able to stay here. And so on a human level, we want to make sure that people who live here can stay here for the long term. And then also, we believe that economic diversity is not just, it also brings value to all of us. And part of the joy and the benefit of Hudson is that we have people across an economic spectrum. But that's only possible if we continue to support the current affordable housing. In addition to that, we need to expand it. So I think that's the reason why I'm here, and I imagine that's the reason why many of us are here, because of those values. So we have a panel here today. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. So we have Tiffany Garriga. She is the majority leader in the Hudson Common Council. She's a board member of the Hudson Community Development Planning Agency. She's also a member of the Hudson City Democratic Committee. We have William Hughes. He's the minority leader of the Columbia County Board of Supervisors, also a member of the Hudson City Democratic Committee. And Matthew Nelson. He's the VP Mortgage Officer at the Community Preservation Corporation, and he's the former Deputy Commissioner and President of the Office of Community Renewal, New York State Home and Community Renewal.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a long title. So the plan for the panel is we're going to have a couple questions sort of laying out the foundation of sort of what is affordable housing. Get some clarity, there's a lot about what affordable housing means. And then we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about present day, what's happening here in Hudson, what are some of the projects that are currently going on, or what are some of the current opportunities. This will not be an exhaustive list of all the things that are going on, it will be some current highlights. And then we'll shift into sort of next steps. What can we do to support these projects? And then that's also when we'll come in with the community participation. So we can hear from you. What are the things that you're working on? I know a lot of people in the audience are sort of engaged with affordable housing projects, and or do you have follow-up questions for things that were already asked, or follow-up questions about how you can get involved. So that's the plan. I guess I ask that you hold your questions until we get to that stage. So I'm going to take a seat now as I kind of pass it off to the panelists. So the intro question for you all is, intro set of questions is, what is affordable housing? How do we define that? What are some of the challenges of defining it? What are some of the most common methods for creating affordable housing? And are there any successful projects that you look to for inspiration as we move forward?
You want me to start?
You can or I can.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so I'll start with what is affordable housing. When you look in the city of Hudson, we have several models of from low income to medium income housing, and everyone seems to get them all mixed up when they start talking about affordable housing. When they look at Bliss, they call that affordable housing. Bliss is really a full voucher, low income housing, where if someone is working, it will subsidize the amount in between what they pay for rent. But it really is a 100% funded HUD project. When you look at the Hudson Terrace is a project that would fall within an affordable housing category, but it too is privately owned, but has vouchers that will support some of the rent, and the rent then gets adjusted based on what, you know, people's income. Crosswinds is another model of affordable housing. Crosswinds though is a workforce affordable housing, and you have to make a certain amount of money per year before you can have entry into that, you know, place of domicile. And it also has a cap. So if you make too little, you can't get in. If you make too much, you can't get in. You have to be right in that sweet spot. So those are the various models that we currently have available in the city of Hudson.
So I'll piggyback on that a little bit, because you have more than you realize you have, actually.
Well, Section 8 vouchers, they can carry them.
So Section 8 is two different things. It's housing choice vouchers, which is a product that follows the tenant wherever they go, thus the name housing choice. You can take that voucher with you for a portion of your rent. Project-based Section 8, which is different, which goes to the project, and the units are subsidized accordingly with rent thresholds. In Hudson, you have a variety of the projects that Billy mentioned, but you also have apartment properties that are subsidized with other state programs, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But affordable housing is a term that's sort of like beauty, right? It's in the eye of the beholder, because affordable housing is different for every person depending on what affordable is to you, right? So you have subsidized low-income housing, you have subsidized middle-income housing, you even have some subsidized properties with luxury units in them, which seems inconceivable. But in New York City, where the cost of rent is so much higher, there are properties that have subsidy that help with the abatement of taxes to make the property more affordable for the marketplace in which that property exists. And that's a very New York City-centric thing, but it does exist in places throughout the state. But affordable housing has many connotations, and it's not limited only to rental housing. For example, when I worked for the state, one of the programs that I had the pleasure of administering is the Affordable Homeownership Development Program, which is a program that's provided subsidy to property owners and to homeowners individually to subsidize the repair of housing to make the property conditions livable and therefore more affordable, because you're lowering the repair needs of that house and making that home a safe, decent, affordable place for someone to live, but also providing down payment assistance and subsidy to help take the cost of, let's say, a $100,000 home, lowering it by $35,000 to $40,000. So at the end of the day, the mortgage that the homeowner has to take out is not a $100,000 mortgage, but a $65,000 or $60,000 mortgage, which inherently makes it more affordable, right? But what we in the industry over time have recognized is that affordable housing is not only something that comes in every color and every stripe, but is holistic in the sense of housing being both a for rent and a to own product. And so the state in particular has adapted very well to providing opportunity to get at both angles. So.
And the other question you asked, one of the questions you asked was, is there a model that I would look at? And me, I'm looking more towards the crosswind model. I do see where there's some limitations that I'm not happy with. I'm not particularly fond of that sweet spot where you have to have a certain income to get in. And if you have that threshold, because I've sent many people up there who may have been $1,000 over. These people have decent incomes, but they may have been $1,000 over, and they weren't allowed to get a place. Or I sent people there who were $1,000 short, and they couldn't get in. And one of the reasons I think that happened is along the lines, and this came up during the term of Mayor Scalera, we were trying to bring that project here, and a pilot was required so that they were able to lower those thresholds for people to get in. And unfortunately, we in the city of Hudson didn't approve the pilot. So the pilot was built solely on state tax credits. And because of that, the regulations that were sent down along with that particular program, that they had to fit within this, the AMI rates, which is the adjusted median income rates. But that's a project that I look at that I see, one has been a real benefit to Hudson. I would just like to see those thresholds changed a little bit. So a project like that I think would work.
Yeah, and it depends on the program that you're receiving subsidy through. So you referenced specifically the state low-income housing tax credit program, which has an 80% or less of income. The federal subsidized low-income housing tax credit is 50 or 60% or less of area median income. Affordable housing is designated in the federal guidelines as a benchmark of 30% of income, right? So that's what truly designates housing as affordable to an individual. That's why I said it ranges and it varies depending on who's seeking that housing, right? But you really don't want to see an individual or a family pay more than 30% of their household income towards rent. Otherwise, they're rent or mortgage burdened and their struggle. I think that your desire to see that is playing out in a lot of different ways in the product development that's happening and the public policy that's evolving around housing. I deal exclusively in rental housing, and I work with Freddie Mac in most of the business I do day to day, and Freddie Mac is a government-sponsored entity that provides mortgage insurance and covers the debt on apartment properties, and for the last 2 years they have been charging hard, thanks to federal regulators, to ensure that there is more affordable units being loaned money through the loan products that they have. And so every deal I do, I have to look at the benchmarks. I have to look at which units are low income, which ones are very low income, and they're keeping very close tabs on that. It's a very big part of what they're doing, because certainly there is a housing crisis for people in various spectrums of the market. Low-income housing tax credit provides a lot of opportunity for development like Crosswinds and like the property up in Greenport that's being built for the Mental Health Association and others like it in Columbia County, whether it's seniors or regular individuals. But what we refer to as workforce or middle-income housing, you're seeing those bands of area median income move up as far as 165% of AMI, which really captures a whole new niche of people. It captures nurses and doctors and school bus drivers and police officers and firefighters, people who make a decent income, but are still very, very hard to come by in affordable rent. So public policy is catching up. It's a little slow.
So one of the things I want to do, Mike, is for people who don't know, and you can tell by the conversation we're having, Matt not only had run this program for the state, but his current company also now provides financing, and he also can walk people there. So if there's people in here that are looking for development or looking to move in that direction, this would be the gentleman to contact. So I just wanted to give him the plug for that.
Appreciate the pitch.
So what I'm hearing is that there is a pretty wide variety of different types of affordable housing.
Oh yeah.
So there's ones geared towards people who are buying a home, ones geared towards people who are renting, and then depending on your income level, there's all these different types. So
Right.
that means that, in some ways, if we said we want more affordable housing, presumably we need all those different types. So any one single project of affordable housing, if it's just one of those bands, is likely to sort of not address everyone else
That's
who
right.
needs those things.
Yeah, you need a
So-
holistic approach. for
So
sure.
that is a point of tension. Also, if someone says, I agree, I want affordable housing, they might be speaking about just one of those types or all of those types.
Mhm.
So that does sort of add some ambiguity as we move forward.
Sure.
So as we, I guess another sort of question around this is, I imagine that the way that most of these things work is that because the sort of renter or buyer is paying less money to get their place, somebody is subsidizing that cost. So what are sort of the sources of funding to sort of make up that cost difference? And then maybe we also could talk about the entities that might run these things, whether it's government or not-for-profit, or maybe there's even zoning things that one can do. What are sort of the mechanisms that make these things happen, and what are the funding sources? And are those sometimes different?
So you can talk about the funding, and I'll talk about the local government.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, in short, it's taxpayers who subsidize it, right? Those of us that that pay income taxes in some small way or large way, depending on your income and how much you pay, help subsidize the benefits that are going out. But it's not exclusive to that, because as Billy will touch on the municipal piece of it, specifically as you referenced before, the pilot, right, which is a payment in lieu of taxes, right, which is a fixed structure to ensure that the municipality is getting money, is equivalent to what I referenced before with the tax abatements in New York City. It's just a different version of the same thing. It's lowering the cost, the overall development, to make sure that the burden on the owner who's providing that rental property is able to find the offset somewhere, right? So specific to Section 8, Section 8 is a section of housing and tax law that specifically allows low-income individuals up to certain income to get that voucher. And so that money is paid through to a housing authority, in the case of a Bliss Towers, right, which goes through the Hudson City Housing Authority, which is federally governed entity. Alternatively, it goes through the state housing agency through their Section 8 program office. And the Section 8 program office provides the housing choice vouchers in block grants, if you will, to counties based on need. And the money flows through a local service provider. Here, you apply through the county, and they have a service provider who's under contract with the state to keep the wait list and process people through on applications and make sure that the rental payments are made and make sure that the housing conditions are kept up to par. Excuse me, that's a big piece of it, right? It's ensuring that. Now, it's not a 100% success rate. We all know that. So I would just say as an aside, if anybody here knows of housing that is either project-based Section 8 or a rental property for which a tenant is a recipient and the landlord accepts that, you have recourse to call and tell somebody if you see deplorable housing conditions or unsafe housing conditions. It does exist, and we need to know about it. So,
what is the income limit for the Section 8 housing?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I think
I have, well, it depends on the household numbers, but
Right.
it goes by extremely low income and very low income. So, for example, if it's a 5-person household, the lowest income would be $28,000, and if it's a very low income, it's an average of $45,000. So those would be the range, and it goes by household. So for another example, if it's a 6-person household, you have 2 adults, 4 children, the extremely low income rate would be $32,000 annual income, and for a very low income, it would be $48,000. So, it's
there's bands. Yeah, it depends on
ranges.
your family circumstances.
So, along with the pilots and the county, the state tax credits and federal tax credits, some of the other things that you could do at a very micro local level is, and we've done this, where there's properties that are owned by the city or the agencies that the city manages, like Hudson Community Development Planning Agency, which Tiff is a member of the board. They own lots and also properties that may be dilapidated, and they could secure those properties and turn them over to a developer for a nominal fee, and have those properties develop in partnership with the tax credits, and in that way you can assure that the rents are going to be brought in. The rent levels are going to be manageable for people, depending on what the target range you're reaching. But in a study would have to be done to figure that out. But for wherever that target range is, you can bring rents in at that level if you do those things.
And that's something that we're working on right now as we speak. It's very important, and added to all of us on the board. And with the lots that HCDPA has, it's on the side of 2nd and State Street, and the Columbia Garden, Community Garden that used to be on 2nd and Columbia, and across from that. So with those lots, we're focusing on creating affordable housing and looking for developers to work with us and seeking those fundings. And so far, so good. We have 4 wheels on the bus. We have 1 turning, and that's good news, because for a long time, the subject matter has been a subject. And now we're starting to actually do something and recognize, and that's what we're doing. And you're all welcome to come to our monthly meetings, but that's what we're doing. And one of the people that we've been working with is Sean Fitzgerald, and he's from the New York State Homes and Community Renewal, and he's, as far as helping us with resources and connecting us, and so far so good. I mean, just come to our meetings. Those are the lots right now that we're working on. We're hoping to connect and work with the city, with the foreclosure homes that the city has, to hopefully keep those homes as affordable homes throughout the city. So it's not just in the second ward that we're looking at, but that's what we're focusing on right now as a start. But we're looking to do this throughout the city. We want to do a scattered site.
So I want to make
The
sure.
limit for the affordable housing for certain people, as far as income levels,
Excuse me.
would they, like, okay, for instance, say for me, I make maybe like $41,000 a year. And I've been looking for an apartment since November. It is very hard to find a place in Hudson. A one bedroom is starting at least $850 to $900. I work for the state of New York and cannot afford that alone. And like for places at the Terrace, Crosswinds, I make too much for their budget.
Well, to answer your question with that, and I'm glad that you said that, because we want people to speak up and recognize the awareness and the need. And working with Sheena Salvino here with HCDPA, that's what we're recognizing. And that's what we're focusing on with people with income like yours and lower. And also we're working with the chair of Housing Authority to expand on the small land that they have, so to speak, to expand public housing.
I make too much. I wish I could make too much.
I mean, I can add to and piggyback off of what Tiffany said, you know, and what you're hearing here is that there's an umbrella of opportunity for us to think about what we want as a, you know, housing in the city of Hudson, affordable housing, as it spans the spectrum from homeless to veteran housing, all the way up to people who are making 160% of AMI. So the opportunity for us is really amazing right now. We have an opportunity to really kind of plan and develop a housing program that cuts and takes advantage of all these socioeconomic opportunities that the state is offering. Like Matthew said, there's programming and funding available through all different ways. Now it's up to us to sort of decide and figure out what it is that our community needs, whether it's middle income, what you're experiencing right now, because I absolutely can empathize with your position. It's like you can't find an apartment in Hudson that's affordable for 30% of your income, and you don't even want to be spending 30%
No,
of your
that's
income.
the ceiling. That's, you don't want to
Right,
be
you
above
don't
it. You
want
want
to
to
be
be
doing that. That's,
Right.
there's no savings.
Well,
You have no
right.
savings
Really,
for
because
an
the more you
emergency.
make, the more they're gonna take. So,
Exactly.
Right.
So what I think we're
And then
looking
you
at
just
now
working
is,
to pay
you
for
know,
rent.
this is an amazing group of people who are, you know, concerned and interested in this project, which is incredible, and I can't wait to engage everyone on this. But you know, there are resources available across the spectrum. So you know, it's sort of up to us to decide what it is that we want actually, and you know, identifying exactly, you know, X percentage of veteran housing, homeless housing, middle income housing,
senior housing.
50, 60, 120% of AMI, and developing a pipeline for that is something that we're beginning. We're in our very nascent stages of, you know, understanding what the resources are that are available, which is what Tiffany is alluding to at HCDPA. We have a very small amount of property available to us right now, so we want to develop affordable housing on those properties that are available to us, which is what we're moving toward at this point. What that spectrum of cost is going to be, we're working out the details of that, understanding what funding is available to us, what resources we have in-house, and how we can apply and leverage those things. But this broader discussion helps us kind of understand sort of fully what the community is looking for. So if it is that we're looking for middle income housing specifically, we know things like crosswinds work. We know that, you know, maybe we need to lower it a little bit, and so then we can sort of say exactly what we need on that level. So I think this is amazing.
But even those little places like that, if you do go and apply for a housing, there is none.
The
Right,
wait
because
lists
there's
are
too
so
little.
long.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there is
That's
none.
why
I
we're
wonder-
working on creating it.
I wonder if this fits in with the study the county is doing.
Well, and that's why I want to piggyback off of what Sheena was saying and Matt, because one of the parts that, you know, that we keep falling back is because we have all these categories. And Hudson did do a study a few years ago, and I think just because of the movement of properties in Hudson, in and around Hudson, the study is probably obsolete at this point, or very close to it. So,
Yeah, they're usually a snapshot in time. You have to continue to evolve and adapt them.
and so because of that, and because of our, also our homeless situation, the commissioner at the time of DSS and the county attorney, the attorney at DSS, who is now our acting commissioner, Bob Gibson, along with the chairman of the county and myself, we got together and decided that we were going to have an aggressive push from the county addressing emergency housing, and that's someone if they lose their house in an emergency, they need to be placed immediately. And homeless housing, obviously, that's someone who either is turned over to the county for whatever the various reasons, or for some reason just don't have the means to afford housing and they end up homeless. And then affordable housing. So we wanted to take a broad look and a deep look at those three things. So we went through the process and have now hired Bill Teeter, who we will have working with Sheena and ACDPA, and also with looking throughout the county to do an assessment of exactly what we're talking about, to see in which communities. First, we want to do an assessment of what we have. We want to know what we have in the county and what we have here in Hudson and Greenport and the other towns. And then we want to, see what the need is, and then what's the income ranges that we want to target. We want to have that kind of targeted information so we can come back to HCDPA, or we can go to the county and say, this is the kind of homeless housing we need to develop, and that will be more cost effective, where we can get a real bang for our buck. This is the kind of affordable housing we need to develop in this particular area, because one model that works here in Hudson may not work in Chatham or may not work in Philmont. So we want to work with all those areas and develop models that will fit within the communities that we're targeting.
If I can go back to a point that was asked before, which is the challenges, right, around affordable housing. And one of the challenges is a term that you may have heard called NIMBY, which stands for Not in My Backyard. And it's a constant struggle for folks who are looking to develop and talk about the issue of affordable housing. And I think one of the things that you have to make central to the plan that you developed here in Hudson, and I just want to say for the record, I'm a Columbia County resident. I'm not here just as somebody who used to do housing. I live up in Kinderhook, so this is personal for me as well, because this is not a Hudson issue specifically. It's everywhere across the county. But the notion of not in my backyard it comes into play far too often because people don't understand or are not well educated enough on what the term affordable housing means. So as you're going out and having these conversations and inviting people to come in, I think one of the central things you want to continue to repeat, not just say at the outset of one event, what does affordable mean, right? Because affordable doesn't mean that it is Bliss Towers, because it comes with a connotation of, concentrated poverty in one place, because it's low-income housing run through a housing authority.
And not that it's just low income, it's public housing, which
Right.
also means that utilities is included with their rent, as to where the Hudson Terraces and Crosswinds, they have to provide that themselves, along with their.
And a lot of people look at these models and look at them as, in some cases, it's government giveaways, tax giveaways, and things of that nature. And in some cases it is, but it may not be to the extreme levels that they envision that it is.
Right, but if you have a good holistic plan that addresses every segment of the population that you have here and ensures that your community can grow, not in neighborhoods, but as a community, and grow holistically, you're going to come out so much better on the other end as a result of that. And I think one of the things that is important as you think about municipal involvement in this is, well, two things really. One is zoning, right? Making sure that zoning laws align with what you want to do, and making sure that the barriers to entry are as low as they can be, particularly as it relates to ground-up new construction and development, about how much density there can be, how many stories you can go up, whether it's a deed-restricted property for, let's say, seniors, right? Is it 55 and over? Is it 65 and over? Where's the catchment area that's most important? But not least of which is, on these scope of issues, the question of taxes, right? And Billy, you said before that Crosswinds, which the company I work for has a mortgage on, so it's a property I know well. Crosswinds was denied a pilot right?
That's correct.
And I don't know what was there before Crosswinds. It may have been a
It
vacant
was an
lot.
open lot. It was.
And so what are the taxes that are paid on an open lot? Typically.
It was,
Right.
well, it was city owned, so it was not.
Okay, so it's city-owned. Okay, so it's not taxed, it's not revenue generating, right? And here you have somebody who's come in and said, I want to turn a vacant lot or a dilapidated building that someone's walked away from into a property that's returned to the tax rolls. And all I'm asking you for is a gradual increase in those taxes so I don't have to get hit with that tax increase right away. And I say that because it's important to recognize that while a pilot seems like a government giveaway, right, to a rich developer, I can promise you that very few of the people who work in this industry are rich. I'm not saying there aren't some, but very few of them are, and very few of them are doing it to enrich themselves. But the notion that it's a giveaway when they're putting property back on the tax rolls, the government is making revenue, which means taxes could come down lower for other people if there's money coming in on the other side. So you have to have the blinders come off on that issue, and you have to have a local government that's willing to have that conversation. And I know you all went through that on the hotel project, and it was maybe a bit of a challenge, but maybe that's just the opening of the door to more accepting conversation of that going forward.
And I want to throw something in there, Mike. Coming to this meeting, I ran into a few people. Everybody knows me. I'm sitting at No Leaders all day. And, you know, the sentiments I was getting from people who knew we were having this panel discussion today was somewhat bleak. I was surprised, but came to me and said, well, you guys talk about this every year for the last 10 years. And I couldn't deny that, because every year that I was on the council and on the board of supervisors, we talked about developing affordable housing. And each time we would get to the point to where we're doing a study or actually taking a vote on whether we're going to build it or not, it would fail for one reason or another. So to see that people are you know, lacking in optimism on such projects, I can see it. And what I said to him, I said, I think just by witnessing all of you in the room today and seeing the hard work that Tiffany is doing and that Mike is doing, that I think there's a different headwind behind it this time. And I'm hoping that we all in the city of Hudson can get behind an affordable housing project, regardless of the level or the bands that we're looking for. But if we get behind something, and I know we have to do a 3 to 5 year plan, everybody's saying, in some cases 10 years, but quite frankly, we can't wait 3 to 5 years. I myself personally have been talking to developers who are ready to put shovel in the ground right now. They said, point me in the right direction, and they will work with Matt and then to secure the financing. They just want to get started now. And I think we need to have that mindset that maybe we could start and do a smaller project now and do the bigger, larger city planning around that. But I don't think we can wait 3 to 5 years before we start doing these kinds of projects.
And I agree with Bill, what Bill just said, and also, you also have to understand that, yes, there are people, as she stated in the back, with middle income that is still looking for apartments. We have people on the waiting list for Bliss Towers, for Hudson Terraces, and even Crosswinds that are over 2 years. So these, you know, and they are working, and there are families, but they are considered homeless. And we don't see them on the street because they're couch surfing.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't want to recognize it because they don't see them on the street. But you have to understand that, you know, it's a small community and we wouldn't want to see our fellow neighbors on the street, so we would take them in. But understanding with rules and regulations with, for example, with Bliss Towers, if they're not on your lease, no matter how kind-hearted you are, you're in jeopardy of getting evicted yourself. So now we'll have 2 families out of a home. So this is very important, and I have been working very hard with Sheena Salverio with finding developers and funding, and that's why they've been coming down, they've looked at the sites. We're going to do another tour March 3rd, I believe, at 10 a.m. And we want to get that second wheel on the bus turning, and we want to get this moving, and we want to have people develop, because with my experience and the people that I know personally, I know an individual that's been homeless for over a year, and they moved out of the city of Hudson, and they're still homeless, and they want to come back, but they can't afford it. And this is where they were born and raised. So how can you tell someone born and raised that they can't come back home? And that's sad, and that's what I've been working hard on, to focus in on the people who are on the waiting list, focusing on the people like the young lady in the back who spoke of, who's a hardworking individual who needs a place to stay and continue to remain in a place they call home in this city.
So how do we get to, instead of not in my backyard, yes in my backyard, maybe Tiffany, as the majority leader on the council, what do you think, what can the public do to help show the council or help show HCDPA that the public is behind these efforts?
Well, that's a very important question because I continuously tell people you have to come to City Hall and speak up because I am the majority leader, but I am a vote. Everyone else has to vote as well. And I can speak for the people 1,000 times, but it's more personal if you come to City Hall and speak your situation, and others come to City Hall and speak their situation. So council members, other than myself, will recognize and be aware of the need, and rather than consider it as just a rumor. Because some council members feel like, as Matt just stated, continuously, what is affordable housing? What is affordable housing? And, for me, my answer says, walk in the office of Hudson Terraces, they'll let you know. Walk in Bliss Towers, they'll let you know. But this is a very important matter, and if we want to get the city behind it and to also recognize, and I'm not saying all council members are not willing to participate in this important subject matter, but if you want everyone on board and to get these votes passed, you have to speak up at City Hall, whether it's every meeting, it's some meetings, but you send people for you, bring everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important.
That's great. So speaking of speaking up, let's maybe turn to the audience and hear from you. So I'm particularly interested in, I guess, if you have, I know a lot of people in the audience are also working on affordable housing in addition to the panel or have expertise in this. So feel free to share your expertise about ongoing projects or ongoing knowledge. If there were questions if you have questions to the panelists, feel free to ask those things. And then please introduce yourself so everyone else can know who you are. Rick, did you want to go?
You mind?
Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Rick Rector, First Ward Alderman.
Yeah.
Supervisor Hughes, thank you all very much for doing this, first of all. You said that you knew people that are ready to put shovels in the ground.
Correct.
What are we waiting for? What do you need?
Well, it's not that simple. One, I actually, we had a phone conversation with Sheena and we were looking over schematics and talking plans and things of that nature. If, for example, I mentioned to one of the developers the lot on the corner of 4th and State. That particular lot offers a certain opportunity. But if you're going to bring a developer in, then we need to be talking to people like Matt. We need to be talking to you, the city, because you own the lot and could sell it, right? At whatever that price is, it has to be somewhere near the market rate. So you would sell it to the developer. He would deal with Matt to secure financing, or an agency like Matt to secure the financing and tax credits and so forth, and then they can move forward from there. But that process, the window to apply for the tax credits, and you can speak more to that, Matt, but it's limited. So it's not like you just apply any time of the year. So to do a project like that, if you start now, you still may be 12, 13, 14 months out before you actually get to put shovel on the ground. And this is why I was saying is we need to move sooner rather than later, because if somebody is planning to do that now, before they can even start construction, they may already
agree with that. I support that because you're right. You will hear people say we need a 10-year program about this, and that's going to negate somebody who's really willing and able to do it immediately.
And
If I can just say though, you need a long-term plan.
Sure.
Okay, and you need recognition and acknowledgement from everybody who's got a stake in this that you can't get it all in day one or year one, right? That you have to know that you might get a rehab of a 6-unit walk-up on Warren Street done in the next 6 months to a year, but the tax credit application period can be a 2-year window. So if you're putting in as part of your global plan concentrated low-income housing tax credit property, that's a long-term objective. So you have to have the right blend, and you have to have acknowledgement on the front end that you can't get everywhere you want to be right away. It is a process. And I hate to be the naysayer, but that's just the reality. And one of the complications is the cost of construction is ever rising, and the availability of debt in many cases or construction lending is ever shrinking or made more restrictive. So you have to have the right developer with the right set of skills and experience, the right understanding of the market to be able to design a property that, after the cost of construction is established, they can benchmark what their rents are going to be able to pay the debt, right? You want a shovel-ready project, and the words are about to come out of my mouth, I hope nobody in the room takes offense to, but if you want a shovel-ready project where somebody's got the money to do it, you've got one here in the town of Greenport, the Falls, on Route 66. It's a gigantic project with a lot of units, and I have no idea how successful they've been, but I read some of the stories about it, and I know where the rents are, and I wouldn't say that property is A, affordable, or B, in line with the market, but it was a shovel-ready project that somebody had the money to do. If you have shovel-ready developers with a tax credit project, there's two types of tax credits. There's 4% tax credits, which are through 4% bond financing, which are very limited in upstate New York, and you have the 9% tax credit, which is a once-a-year application window. And it usually happens in, I believe, December for the application. No, it might be the spring with awards in December. In any event, it's once a year for that funding, and it's hugely competitive, both for the state and the federal tax credits. So, but shovel-ready projects do get an open window, and they get an accelerated review. So you benefit from having a developer on the tax credit side who is shovel-ready, and that's the technical term that they use in the state when they're doing project review. So
Now, Rick, I will say you have property owners who may own properties currently, looking to rehab them or bring them up to code or so have you, and start looking for these assistants to bring the rents down so that they can create housing stock that is already there. But in that case, they then are looking for a pilot so that they can make up that difference. And that then gets into the discussion of the council of, does the council actually have the appetite to currently, give a pilot to some property that may already be paying the full tax amount?
or look at adopting, if you haven't already, the 485A tax exemption, which is state tax law that, if you're not familiar with it, allows for a 12-year period of tax exemption on the as current tax value. So you're not going to lose anything, but you're going to defer the increase in the improvements to a certain period of time. So there are multiple things, not just a pilot in its traditional sense.
That's great.
Hi, my name is Mark Morgan Perez. I bought a property on the 400 block of State Street some years ago and just relocated there. I've worked for the past 15 years in affordable housing development in New York City and also on historic preservation in South America. But I'd like to, I guess, ask the panel, it's one thing to have a shovel-ready developer with money. It's another question as to whether those developers are the best fit for the town, and I'm curious as to what your perspective is on, again, this assessment that's coming up on assessing, like having a data-driven model for, who needs what kinds of housing and where, and also in terms of putting out RFPs so that you get the best project, not just somebody that comes in and puts up something
Like the Falls, right.
Actually, that's very important, and that's why I had the meeting with Sheena, because I wanted people who were looking to come here to develop to understand that, we have, just because we're looking for affordable housing doesn't mean we don't want to have hold to architectural standards. And also, now that you have new technologies available, green technology and things of that nature, we want to see who will integrate those into the community the best, along with developing a real palatable development. So not only RFPs, but RFQs initially as well, request for qualifications, to see what their qualifications are, and then go to the RFP model. So all those, I think, would be required for anybody that's going to come and do a development.
So there's a lot of emphasis talking about creating a plan, a comprehensive plan. Is that what the county is working on, or do you see like you're like the lead on that, or and then what's the timeline to getting something like that done?
I mean, just as far as where we are in the process, like I said, it's very early stages. This administration has decided to take on affordable housing as a priority, and for each CDPA, it's become a priority of the agency to really focus on affordable housing. About 5 years ago, there was the housing needs assessment done, and like we mentioned, it's a little out of date, and, you know, it's a benchmark, we can kind of use as an underlying, and some of the things that they've recommended haven't really changed that much. But as we are right now, looking to see what the basket of resources are, they're wide and varied, so now it's sort of identifying what it is that the community wants. And so what we're doing right now is understanding completely that there's a huge amount of resources available, private, public, there's a bunch of resources. Developers are interested in Hudson. We have no shortage of people interested in Hudson, which is fantastic. We're in a really wonderful position. So then, as a community, it's time to decide, you know, what it is that we want. What is the thing that you want to see happen in Hudson? And so where we are now is just at our last board meeting is sort of saying, okay, we now understand the full breadth of our resources. Now it's time to sort of start to talk to stakeholders. So our project at HCDPA was focused on the between 100 and 200 block because that's where we have the most concentration of property available for development. It's not a huge amount of property, and when people are like, oh, HCDPA has a ton of property, they're tiny properties. They happen to be lined up in a nice area, but it's a steep incline, and we have to really think creatively about what we're going to do there. What happens next door is there's like an old paper road that was there, and then there's another block of land that's owned by the housing authority. So what we really want to do is work with the housing authority, work with our property, work with our neighbors at Kite's Nest, who, you know, recently had a tragedy but are looking to rebuild from their tragedy to look for opportunity. So really you want to get your stakeholders in line to sort of say, hey, are we interested in working together? Build that out, the Hudson Terraces and Schuyler Court. So then we are looking together, we're actually all forward-facing, and so we're working on that forward-facing moment. So we're focusing on a smaller area in the city because, well, we don't have a ton of in-house resources to be able to be like, you know, let's do an entire city comprehensive plan. We probably have to get some funding together from the city to say, hey, we need a consultant to come in and do an entire comprehensive plan, which is absolutely an option, and I think that's a great idea, but work with what I have.
Yeah.
So if we're working on our pilot program right now, where we're looking at the 100 to 200 block of State Street, where we have an opportunity to start to address some of the needs of the community, which we've heard, we can start to address those things. And I think, you know, Alderman Griega and the mayor have really wanted to push that forward, so we're pushing it forward. And the supervisor has come to me with developers saying there's interest. Okay. Great, I'm glad that there's interest, that's fantastic. We need to understand more fully what the community wants to do here in this particular location and across the city board and develop a plan of action. So whether it's phased in terms of there's programming for homeowners, existing homeowners, so we stabilize and make sure that those people are comfortable and happy where they are, because the last thing we want is homeowners to leave the city of Hudson. We don't want that. We want to keep the neighborhood stable. So we want to offer that kind of program. We also want to offer facade redevelopment and to the housing authority that needs to make sure that their community is safe, solid, and secure. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration in just a small area. So we're really trying to think about that holistically and develop a comprehensive way to move forward. We know that there are resources. We know that there are issues. We want to be able to meet the issues with the resources that we have. And so it just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of thinking, a lot of thinking actually. So this is really fantastic, and it helps that there's so much support behind this as a project. So everyone that's on this particular list can be part of this discussion. So back to where we are.
Outside of that, Mike, there are a couple of people now who have recently acquired properties who have also mentioned to me, so this would be outside the scope of properties that are owned by either HCDPA or the city. And they were
You mean like privately held property?
properties who were looking to either partner with a developer or try to develop the property with them, you know, on their own. And I suggested against that. Again, one, although they own the property, I would love to see them develop it in a way to where it does integrate within, you know, still what we're looking to have in the city of Hudson. But I also encourage them, because if you're going to self-fund a project, it's almost impossible to self-fund a project of that scope and to bring the rents down to the point to where you're able to make the fit within the what we see, at least dealing with DSS, the sweet spot is that $600 to $950 range for single individuals to family of 3. So if we want to get rents in that range, to have someone self-develop that property is very difficult. And so I talked to those couple of individuals and told them that they should reach out to Matt, and that Matt may probably be able to walk them through some of the things that are tools that are available to help them reach that range with their development.
Rebecca?
I have two questions that are unrelated, and the first one is, in terms of finding out like what the community wants, what is the mechanism for that? I mean, this is an informal.
And this is a fantastic, what we're gonna result is like a little contact list of people who are interested in this.
Right.
So then that contact list either grows and we have community meetings to talk about, here are things that are in the process of we're thinking about, here's a rendering for you to give feedback to, here's what do you think individually. So it's like, it's an iterative process where it's a process, it takes time, and there's no way that anyone, unless you're a private landowner with your own private interest, with your own private money, to just develop anything, because we just don't have that luxury. We have a couple of assets, we're trying to leverage those assets against what the state has available to us and make that happen. So just building that bridge where we can say, okay, we have some property, what do we want to see happen there? Here's what we want to see happen there, here's a plan for it. Okay, state, this is what we want. They have been so wonderful about being like, you tell us what your community wants and we will help you figure it out.
Right.
And it's been really amazing, surprisingly amazing to work with them, so.
On top of that, Rebecca, to that question, that was the primary reason why we want to bring Bill Teeter on for the county. So, and not to speak for the commissioner, but I think that he's going to direct him to actually contact Sheena and work in hand with her. And he has a real background in marketing along with housing. And one of his things is not only just doing the study, but how to reach out to the public. Because I've been the lead of several projects in the past of trying to do homeless housing and affordable housing in Hudson, and both of which failed. And I think they failed for the reason that I did not reach out holistically to the public. I reached out some, but I didn't reach out broad enough. And I take the full blame for that. But I think with having him on board and coming in and working with Sheena, and also doing that data parallel study along with what Hudson is already doing, so when he eventually comes to the table, he's not only coming to get public input, he's coming with data in hand.
On the flip side of that, I'll say that one of the challenges in addressing the issue from a public forward perspective is that there's oftentimes shame around housing, and people are not always willing to come forward and talk about what their limiters are and what their housing situation is, right? And so to the extent that that is a barrier that can be broken down and you can get people more comfortable with coming forward and talking about what it is that they need as an individual, as a family, as a community, answering that question becomes much, much easier. But it is a process, and it takes a while to get there, and there's no one way to get there. Meetings like this help, survey tools help, there's housing needs assessments that are done, there are entities that do this work, and it's the outcome is very beneficial when you get that information.
So I'm starting to see a lot of hands raised. So if you make eye contact with me, I'll note you and add you to the list. So I have Rick. Mandy, do you still have are you done? You had your hand raised.
I just had a.
Oh, you have your follow-up question.
Sorry,
Rick,
I can monopolize for just one more second. It's about Airbnb. I'm actually, I know this may be like sort of a left field question, but I am curious in terms of assessing what are the needs of the city, like to what extent is it looked into the effect that Airbnb is having on available rental units in Hudson? And I just learned about this law. I think there's a law, but somebody may know way more about this than that. That there's a law about properties that are not lived in but are really just being rotated for Airbnb use. And I'm just curious what the history of that is that you might all already know about in Hudson, or.
I can't speak to Airbnb. I've only rented once with an Airbnb in Massachusetts, and otherwise I have no idea.
So I can only give you a little about what I've heard, not from the study. And I don't. When our guy goes out and does the study, we will look at. I'm thinking he's going to reach out and look at hotel rooms, because we quite frankly we use a ton of hotel rooms for our homeless boys. So he will look at that stock hotel rooms, bed and breakfasts, our boutique hotels, because you're right, that does play a part, but a small part of what we're talking about. Now Airbnb is a little different.
Yes.
And how you account for those numbers is also tricky. Some people actually advertise them on the website, and some people tend to try to do it word of mouth.
Yeah.
So it will be hard, I think, for us to get at those numbers. And I agree. I think it's playing a part of what the problem is as far as rentals. But I think it's playing a part primarily on, you know, your more affluent kind of neighborhoods. It's not.
I don't know, I mean, my impression is that, that it helps to just elevate the general rental, like for everyone. It takes, like that
Taking those
range
rates,
that you're
yeah.
talking about, the 750 or 600 to 950. That range was, like, did exist in Hudson when I got here 12 years ago, and now it's gone.
It's playing a part. How big of a part it's playing in gentrifying that? I don't know. I don't know how to get at that number.
So I got Rick, Mandy, and Mark.
Actually, my question was
Okay.
very similar to Rebecca's, so.
So, all right, Rick, you're up.
I think it's well established that any cost associated with developing affordable housing is a pass-through to the tenants. So that said, I think the package deal that the city needs to put together is for all the available lands that they have. When we talk about a shovel-ready piece of land, they're not shovel-ready. They're not environmentally tested. They're not title searched, and there's no resolution in place which will tell a developer exactly what kind of relief he's getting from pilots. So I think that's the package deal you have to put together before you put an RFP out. And when you put an RFP out, it has to be individual for each lot, each parcel, what you want. What does the city want to see on that particular piece of land? You might have, like 4th Street, you're saying that's 18,000 square feet, that particular lot. What do you want to see? You want any retail? You want all housing, SROs? You want 2-family? Whatever it is, you know, you want mixed. But that's the ingredients needed in an RFP. But you have to put it together. The first thing the city could be doing right now, if they're really serious, is doing a phase 1 and phase 2 on those lands, doing a title search, and put together a resolution that will give some developer some indication of what kind of relief he's getting. When all that is said and done, then you can put it together and put an RFP out, and the developer knows what obstacles he or she are facing.
So the challenge is, can we do that before we do the study? I guess it seems like which comes
Well, you
first.
can do
Well, you're gonna have to do it
environmental.
anyway.
You can start to
Title
go.
search environmental, it's
Yeah.
your land. If it's
Right.
city-owned land, and you want to ultimately shop it, that's the first thing they should be doing right now.
When HCBPA took over some of the properties it has on State Street, do you know if there was a phase 1 or phase 2 done when they took the properties for urban renewal? Like,
No.
None of that, okay.
There's never been only time phase 1 has ever been done, or phase 2, if it leads into that, is when somebody's interested in the property.
And you're talking about environmental assessments when you say
That's
phase
correct.
1 and phase 2?
Yes.
Well,
There's nobody no developer is gonna be
No,
involved in the land if they dig
Agreed.
in and find bad stuff.
That kind of package sounds excellent for the developer, but what we're talking about is what the community wants and needs and how to serve those needs as well. It sounds like that's a fabulous inventory and very easy, a lot of work that the city would do for a potential developer, but really we're looking at the needs of the community and what kind of housing, what kind of affordable housing is going to be developed from these parcels. And is it a chicken or egg situation? Do you spend city resources and put this package together for a developer without the caveat of what the community needs first? Or do you do some kind of survey monkey, like a survey of affordable housing, let's say through a civic website, and let people chime in on what the needs are, and then you actually have some figures to support
but they're not.
what
They're not-
we need in the community.
They're totally separate.
Right.
It shouldn't be separate.
Those, when we start talking chicken and egg, like for example, to do a phase 1 on the property, we're going to do a phase 1 on the property regardless if you're going to do high-end housing or affordable housing.
Those are like universal
park.
steps
Right,
that we
it's-
have to take no matter what.
Right.
Any action has to be.
That's almost step 1 for anybody.
Right. The two are not mutually exclusive. I mean, they're not separate. They're interlocked, right? But you don't have to do one before the other. you can start to work to identify potential development concerns or issues, which is what Rick is talking about. At the same time that you can undertake a study, you know implicitly that you have a need, and so the need hasn't been defined with the outcome yet, but this is a piece of defining that outcome, and I think it's critical. And Rick is absolutely right, because we in the housing industry deal with this issue all the time, where somebody says, ready to go, and then they get in the site and they realize there's asbestos, there's lead, there's buried oil tanks, there's PCBs in the ground, you name it. And you know what happens there? Cost goes way up. So if you can identify up front that you truly do have a shovel-ready site, because it's just a pile of dirt, as opposed to a pile of fill that's not stable and it has to be dug. There's so many issues there. And it's time intensive too, right? So if you were to start a phase 1 environmental survey today, it may take you 6 months to get through to that. And if, God forbid, you have to go to a phase 2, it could add more time. That's 6 months you want to be doing your survey, so that you know by the time that environmental is done, okay, now I've got a site, now I know it's clean, and now I know I want designated affordable housing or mixed income or mixed use or blah, blah, blah. So.
But don't you develop knowing whether or not you're going to serve an affordable housing population, or, let's say, the Falls?
Well, it depends. I mean, as a developer, if you're that far along, absolutely you know what your target is, right?
Right.
Exactly. But that, as a developer, and I'm not a developer, but if I were, that's different than a community saying this is our need. And if it's a municipally owned lot, then they dictate the terms. And they say to somebody, we have this lot, it's this big, we want this on the lot. And if you put it out there, you will get bites at that bid. And someone will build what you want them to build, as opposed to the Falls. I don't judge the Falls. It's a beautiful project. It's a great adaptive reuse of an otherwise vacant site, so it's great. It's a totally different animal. It was a free market opportunity for somebody to acquire property and build what they thought.
That's different, a free market opportunity.
Yeah, that's correct. That's right.
I'd just like to add that, I've worked as a real estate developer and developed private projects on my own behalf with my own resources. And I've worked as a project manager for both large and small nonprofits, both for community-based nonprofits and for large international nonprofits. And being a for-profit private developer is being a completely different animal than being a non-for-profit real estate developer, which requires a whole different set of skills, a whole different laundry list of financing options, and a whole bunch more of political negotiation and negotiating with community stakeholders. With respect to a phase 1, people aren't familiar, it's like a phase 1 environmental assessment, which is to determine whether or not a building or property has anything hazardous on it that could come up when you're building or put people in damage. Phase 1s are generally very easy to do and don't take that long. In fact, some phase 1s people do without even visiting a property. You just go into historical records, see what was there, and if nothing horrible was there before and the property is vacant, you pretty much know. But so the thing is, that shouldn't be a deterrent to a developer bidding on a city piece of land. In fact, on RFPs that I've responded to, it's stated that it's going to be at the developer's expense to conduct a phase 1.
Sure, but you get a different outcome of responses when you do that,
And that's
right? Because
No, sure, I'm saying it would
so
be great if we could, have everything, spelled out, but at the same time, I think, more aggressive developers and people who are really going to be in these things for the long haul, because affordable housing projects take at least twice as much time to develop as regular projects, because you're subject to the funding cycles and the electoral cycles of officials who approve or don't approve things and deals that were made before or after someone has been in. These are long haul things. There is no fast way to build, to take a chunk of affordable housing and get it done anywhere, whether it's in Hudson or New York City or anywhere else. So I would think the RFP process, and yes, it would be great to have phase 1s and phase 2s done if necessary, but you should be specific enough on one hand to give the community what it needs, but open enough so a developer can be creative and come up with something really great that maybe no one has thought of before, and come up with innovative ways of financing it as well.
Yeah, sure. Sure, I think it's just, I'm sorry. I think it's just, if the city has the opportunity now and hasn't yet done anything with the site, I think to Rick's point, it's a good measure to just advance the ball further. It saves time on the back end, and it helps a developer, for-profit or not-for-profit, know what their basis is and what their starting point is. So it's not a necessity, but it's certainly a good commitment on the part of the city if they were willing to take that leap. And it's not a huge amount of time depending on the site. This particular site, I think, has some questionable history, so maybe has some issues to it, if I'm not mistaken. However, right, has some dumping history or something.
Possibly,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, so
Overall,
in any event, it's also not that terribly expensive, right? So from a dollar's perspective, the city could take that leap of faith, and it's a gesture of goodwill towards the next step in the process. So.
Tiffany, you wanted to
I
add?
just wanted to also address as far as finding out the needs of the community. You know, that's what we have been doing with HCDPA. We've been reaching out to the Department of Social Services to find out the list of homelessness and how many families and singles and things of that nature. We've been reaching out to the Bliss Towers and Hudson Terraces to find out that same information so we can figure out the broad need of apartment sizes and bedroom sizes and things of that nature, and also just engaging with people in the community and continuously having them come out to the meetings because everybody needs to hear it.
Yeah, Paolo?
My name is Paolo. I'm a small business owner in Hudson. I don't live in Hudson, I live in Greene County because of real estate costs and taxes. Highly recommend it, but it is a drive. I was just wondering if anyone here represented the Galvin Foundation.
I do.
Okay. Because I feel like, as someone who doesn't live here and drives in, drives out every day, there's a ton of abandoned property in Hudson. Most of it, if you look at the property record, has a sign on it or is empty. And is there any actual initiative to redevelop that, those properties that are now vacant into something that has an affordable component, even if it's partial market rent or something like that?
They are working on 4 sites right now, 215 Union, 260. They're finishing up 11 Warren Street, where the Salvation Army is going to move into. I'm not really sure where the other one now. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to go into the affordable housing market, if you will, if the city shows a little love. They haven't done that too much to Galvin. Galvin has had at least 4 projects that has been on the drawing board, that's gone in front of the Common Council, at least 90 units, and all of them have been turned down.
Was that in the last, like, 5 years?
$900
No, they had nothing to do. These were ones that were on the corner of 5th and Warren, and if you remember, there's 30 units there. He said that wasn't the proper location for those people. That was the statements made in the Common Council meeting. Then they had a big project on the corner of 4th and Columbia Street. They turned that down. They proposed a housing unit, and of course the developer that Mr. Hughes was talking about is not Galvin.
Right.
So for those that want to know that. But even on the 18,000 square foot on the corner of 4th and Columbia Street, they refused to sell him land there too. So, when I find it ironic in that I'm looking around and I see 2 Common Council members right here. So I don't really know what the commitment is of the Common Council to provide affordable housing incentives when you only have 2 Common Council members here. And I can tell you right now that this individual has probably would be more than happy to help the city in this particular need if the city is willing to work with him. But again, I think this gentleman said it best. I think the best way to do it is RFPs, the fair process, so that every developer who's in the market of providing affordable housing has the opportunity to bid on it and take the best bid, the best project.
But the RFP wouldn't affect retrofit projects, right? Or would you?
No,
still need
it
to-
wouldn't, no retrofits.
So is there I'm wondering if there's a way to encourage more of a liaison between your organization and the city of Hudson to actually show that there would be public support for redevelopment. Maybe there wasn't in the past, or people didn't know about it and so forth, but because I feel like the pulse of folks who live here or try to live here would be to support that. If we're looking for, doing ground up development, which takes years, and there's a need now, and there's public support now, and there's actual, framework up in the form of brick buildings that could be retrofitted potentially quicker.
Your name is Paolo?
Paolo.
Okay, so I actually started doing some of that because as Alderman Garriga just said, she reached out to DSS, and we've been taking a deep look at who's the property owners in and around the city of Hudson and also the county. And obviously you see where Mr. Galloway, through his foundation, owns a great deal of properties. And the lack of affordable housing also drives up our homeless numbers. So we're taking a holistic look at homeless housing along with affordable housing. And so I've reached out to the Galvin Foundation and will continue to reach out to them on a whole myriad of housing options. And one of those things, the next step for me would be to reach out to, our various aldermen and say, this is how we can immediately get at addressing either homeless housing or emergency housing or some form of affordable housing without, along with marrying that along with doing the long-term range or the long-range planning and studying in the studies that we need to do so that we can get the other kinds of models that we're looking for. So those discussions have started. They're in the preliminary stage, and I will continue to do them, and hopefully we're successful at that.
I want to add to that point. In some ways, I think it's our responsibility not to wait for the council to show interest in affordable housing, but it's our responsibility to sort of make the council do that, right? The council represents us, but we can't sit back and assume that they're going to do that work. They're going to respond to our public pressure, and so I think it's we shouldn't expect the council to act until there's overwhelming sentiment for them to act. Otherwise, we're just sort of taking a gamble. So I think moving forward, we have to continue to sort of press our council members that this is an issue that we're concerned about. Not only going to HCDPA meetings and saying how can we help, but also going to council meetings, as Tiffany said earlier, and expressing our concern. And when you see your council member on the street, like, hey, I live in your ward, I need you to, what are you doing on this? And continue to sort of make it known that this is an issue that really affects the core of the city and that we care about it. You haven't spoken yet.
Yes, my name is Sharon Sheridan. I don't live in Hudson currently. I live in Germantown. I am in HUD housing. Would really like to live in Hudson because I'm a city kid, or I was a city kid years ago. So I like being with people. I like having sidewalks. I have a little small dog. I like to walk him outside. I like to get fresh air. I like to walk to shops, various things like that. So as a senior citizen, I have heard nothing about housing for the seniors, so I'm putting in my
It was mentioned. It was mentioned.
Like I said, I think we all agree that.
Maybe I don't know the names of the houses for seniors, okay? So that's, but I want to put my name in. I would be willing to do work to help if I can get in there. Reasonable housing, okay?
Well, I can tell you one property you could look at. It's not in Hudson. It's in Valatia. It's called the Paul Rayhofer Senior Housing, which was a tax credit subsidized housing development.
Whoa, come on, Matt, stop stealing our people.
Sorry, gotta bring them north. There's sidewalks, there's a waterfall, there's shops, it's great. We have a waterfall. I don't know if they have room, but you can check them out. I'm sorry?
Prefer Hudson.
Okay.
I have family in Ancramdale, so, I just kind of like Hudson's.
Well,
We have an apartment building right here on 2nd Columbia. It's called Providence Hall. It's a building for seniors, so please apply.
Okay.
yeah, the one thing, if I can just...
Do they allow dogs?
Yes.
Is that a Bruce Levine?
Is it what?
Bruce Levine?
Crosswoods is.
Yeah.
So
So
let me just say that. Bruce Levine is the developer of Crossland. They chased him out of Hudson. When he tried to get pilots to lower the rents, at that particular time, he said, that's it. I'm going elsewhere, and that's where he went to Glacier.
Yeah, and it was his second project up there. He had done a senior project there previously too. There are plenty of good developers in the Hudson Valley who we work with over the years who do phenomenal work. Many of them are focused on senior housing because there is not only an in-place population that's here that wants it, but there is an aging population and people who want to move from their single-family home or further outside of an urbanish area. I'll call it urbanish because is it technically urban? I don't know. It's urban. Okay, we'll go with it. So to an urban area where you have sidewalks and you have shops and restaurants and a grocery that you might be able to go and get, some of the things that you need. So there's a strong push in that direction. There's lots of focus from the state on providing necessary resources to incentivize the development of senior housing. And again, it comes back to sort of to Rick's point. You've got to have the local buy-in because your zoning has to support it as well. Because typically there's deed restrictions, and I know a developer who wanted to build in the Valatia area, and he wanted to build a 55-plus development because people who are in their early mid-50s are retiring and they don't want to, the kids are in college and they don't want to shovel the snow or mow the lawn. The zoning regulation there is 65-plus, and he said, I can't. The catchment of people who might want to buy the single-family home or rent the apartment in the dual complex he was developing wasn't big enough when you take that leap to 65, right? Income streams are different, life is different, and so, and there was no willingness to make a change to support the project, much like there wasn't a willingness at certain time to provide a pilot. That's where the pressure from the public has to come in to say, this is something we want, this is something that we need, and think about it outside of the bounds of, are we getting $0 or are we getting $100? Because every dollar coming in is better than what you had before.
People retiring at 55 have more money than people who are retiring at 65.
That's fair, and that was part of my point, is that he was doing had a development plan that included small single-story for sale as well as an apartment building, and people who were selling from a bigger house want to move to a smaller house and still live in a single-family home were his target, but not people necessarily at 65 plus, because they don't want to own. They want to.
And before this question, I know we keep harping on this up here because most of us who are sitting up here, and I'm assuming a lot of you in this room are passionate about affordable housing, but to me, the number one thing is, it's not the studies, it's not the fact that we're looking to do all these kinds of things, get the tax credits, it's the public buy-in, and the pressure to get your elected officials to go along with it. Because we've been here, like Supervisor Scalera mentioned, the commissioner over there could tell you, we've been to do these kinds of things several times. And if you get right to the level to where you're ready to actually start construction, and then for whatever the reason that project is voted down or they don't get the things that they need to make the project feasible, they go away, and a lot of times they lose appetite to come back to this community. So it is very important that all of you in the room, your friends, anybody who's in favor of whatever version of affordable housing we're looking at, let's continue the conversation and let's make it known that we're supporting this kind of project here.
Mm-hmm. So, Mark, I see your hand raised, but Tracy hasn't spoken yet. I just want to give people who haven't spoken a chance.
Just a very quick question, and if you've already covered this, I came in a half an hour late, don't bother. I'll get the information from someone else, but I wonder if somebody could identify the top 5 reasons that some people don't want the affordable housing.
I can name the top ones I always hear is rent. Taxes. Excuse me. They think that they're it's gonna somehow get drawn away from the tax base, and they will end up either paying more than what they currently pay. Also, they believe, what I heard a lot with Crosswinds is the clientele. It was going to bring the people that were coming with the affordable housing to also bring crime with them. I heard that quite often.
Tax increase, crime.
And tax.
But they do background checks. A lot of places do background checks.
But we're talking about perceptions, not what it is. And so these stigmas, there's quite a few stigmas that are attached.
That's 2.
When you say so
on the flip side of property taxes going up.
What?
On the flip side of property taxes going up, which I just don't buy, I don't believe it, is the devaluation of property, right?
Okay.
So I live too close to that property and my house is going to lose value, which I think is also not true. Value is implicit to the market, and it's implicit to what someone's willing to pay. And if a community is strong and there are jobs and there are homes and there are services, your property values will stay. And particularly if your taxes are lower, your property value will go up. And so if you have an influx of money coming from a development site that you didn't have in the tax base before, it makes a huge difference. I'll tell you the other concern that comes up quite a bit. I happen to serve on the school board, Ichabod Crane, up in Kennebec. But what you hear a lot of dense urban communities say, we're in a dense urban community, I just took it a whole nother level, right? Is they are concerned when you bring a concentration of housing, forget about whether it's income, low income or not, is the number of students that may bring to a school and what impact that may have on the cost of the school budget, right? Now, I can tell you that almost all the time, unless it's family housing, you're typically getting couples, individuals, seniors, you're getting people who don't bring a large child base to a school district. So it's a bit of a false argument depending on the type of property that's being built.
And the last one is noise.
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 Okay,
Yep.
that's fine.
You
That's
can
fine.
pay $1,200 a month for rent, and you can't smoke, you can't have a pet, you can't pee right, you can't. What the heck?
Is that in your lease?
I'm just saying, you know, like because in Hudson, that's what you're gonna spend.
Right.
And you're not even allowed to do anything you want. You can't even hang a picture on the wall.
Yeah.
With you know, that's crazy.
So
And you're
you
paying
have-
$1,200.
So you have 5 reasons. Is there a reason not to have Sheena or the council members or somebody focus on creating a myth,
Talking points.
fact, myth?
Yeah, the Mythbusters campaign around affordable. I mean,
Yeah.
we missed the one part of the conversation that we talked about, which
Right.
is
Okay.
the negative connotation that comes with the term affordable housing. And affordable housing means everything. For me, what affordable housing means is that everybody who needs a home has a home. And it's affordable to you, it's affordable to me, it's affordable to her. It doesn't matter. That's affordable housing.
And quickly on that point is, the person that we're bringing in through the county has a background in housing and also marketing, and he's going to help us with that aspect.
And if you sound like you got
He has
some...
to know the community very well to be able
He
to help
actually
with that
is from the
aspect.
community.
Sheena, it sounds like you have a volunteer.
It does. I can't wait to get the list of people who are just ready to get out there in the community and really work on this project. I hope everyone signed in today and is expecting, follow-up emails. Great.
We all had a packet put together with surveys to go out in the community to assess the needs of the people. Are you all willing to do that? I can't hear you. You are willing to do
I'll do it in
that?
Malaysia.
Because that's what we need, and we are council members, well, I'm a council member, and you know I'm gonna support the people all the time, but we need that. If you all can come out with those packets and show it to your representatives, look, recognize the needs of the people, because I have people that come to me and say they don't even know who their representatives are,
Right.
and that's an issue.
So
John Foster will have to have a town hall.
we're coming up on 7 o'clock, and I think it's time to wrap up. But I'll stick around. We can stick around for a few minutes and continue the conversation. I just wanted to kind of sum up some of the things that I've heard a lot of at the beginning part of the panel. We were talking about the variety of the options that we have and the variety of needs that we have, and then we sort of segued into in order to get these things done, we need to have really public support to make this possible, and attached to that, we also need to have a plan. I think those two things will work well together, because I think the public it'll be easier to support affordable housing when we have a coherent plan, because people understand what we're talking about. So those seem like sort of two real actionable things. And then in addition to that, there was sort of Rick's point that there are things that we could be doing around sort of like paperwork and studies to queue up so we're ready to act later. So those were some of the key things. I would love to figure out a way to harness this group to continue to build on this, so it's not just a one-off conversation. I know that people, I'm sure, can start going to HCDPA or continue to go to HCDPA. We'll email out the details, so make sure to put on the sign-up list. I don't know if anybody else is interested in sort of continuing to meet once a month or once every 2 months to further these conversations, or if anybody would want to help lead that up. But please come talk to me if you would like to do that. And then, of course, you can come to council meetings or supervisor meetings and support some of our panelists in their work that they're doing.
I don't have a meeting you can come to, but you can call me if you
Yeah,
want.
and you can hang out with Matthew as well.
There's one thing. excuse me, that I'll add as an action item.
Yes.
That anybody in the room can do. A lot of the money that supports housing development in New York State flows through the state government, and they're in budget making season right now. Last year they put $2 billion with a B in the budget for housing development, a lot of which was focused on rural areas and upstate New York. Unfortunately, our esteemed elected officials in the state of New York could not come to terms over the course of a full year on how to spend $2 billion. So it sits there
So it's
unspent.
sitting there.
Yeah, and
Currently sitting there now.
right, and it's obscene that there's that much money that's not being utilized when there's so much need. So regardless of where you live, whether you're in Germantown or Hudson or somewhere on the other side of the river, call Pete Lopez, call Dee Dee Barrett, call Steve McLaughlin, call your local representatives, and tell them that they need to get off the horse and support affordable housing development and the housing budget, because it's critical. And now is the time, because they have until March 31st to finish the budget. So
So thank you, audience. Thank you, panel.
Thanks,
Mr. Graham.